The moment her gold-embossed master key refused to turn, time seemed to slow. I stood on the porch, my heart pounding, as HOA Karen's face twisted from smug superiority to red-faced fury. Her breath came in short huffs, each one punctuated by the rattling click of metal against deadlock. Neighbors peeked through curtains, their eyes widening as she jabbed the key into the lock again and again. I felt a surge of vindication. I had changed the locks the night before, after her illegal patrol down my driveway, after her callous warning that she owned every property line in the neighborhood. But nothing prepared me for the primal howl of outrage that erupted when she realized her key no longer worked. My son, tall and steady with a camera phone in hand, captured every moment without a word, just a record of entitled power unraveling in real time. A tremor of laughter rippled through the small crowd assembled at the end of my walkway. Karen's meticulously coiffed hair bobbed with her frantic movements as she barked. "What kind of joke is this? I have authority." Her voice cracked like overstrained rubber. I stepped forward calmly, my palms open in a peaceful gesture, and said, "You no longer have permission. You're trespassing." She pivoted to glare at me, but the truth was settled in the lock and in my son's steady lens. I felt a rush of righteousness. No more clandestine rulemaking. No more threats of fines posted on my mailbox like ransom notes. The truth of her overreach was laid bare by a simple, unturning key and my son's unblinking camera. And so I watched as the so-called queen of our community realized that power built on intimidation was nothing against a father protecting his home. When she lunged for her phone to call 911, I thought she might try to use the system to reassert her dominance. Instead, we all heard her words broadcast loud and clear. "Yes, ma'am. I'm at 412 Maplecrest Drive. I can't get into the house. He's refusing." Her voice quivered on the second syllable of refusing. My son whispered to me, "I got it all." In that moment I saw not a fearless enforcer, but a woman stripped of her facade, exposed as petty and powerless. Then, just as Karen began to issue a litany of demands for backup and authorities, a twist surfaced. Her voice mentioned the inspector, and from around the corner stepped Mr. Nguyen, the county building inspector, clipboard in hand. He announced that the dwelling had passed a safety upgrade inspection yesterday afternoon courtesy of my request, and that the HOA had no jurisdiction here. Karen froze, mouth agape, as the very person she hoped would rescue her instead confirmed she was out of line. Her composure evaporated. The inspector challenged her with regulations she had repeatedly ignored in her tenure. No HOA president may enter a private property without explicit owner consent, no exceptions. A hush fell upon the street as Mr. Nguyen read the relevant code in his clipped, academic tone. Karen's greedy pause lengthened into disbelief. It was a reckoning she'd never anticipated. I saw her shoulders slump under the weight of her own arrogance. The neighbors exhaled collectively. I realized then that justice often arrives not in a grand spectacle, but in the quiet reading of a rulebook by an impartial official. My son's footage and the inspector's testimony formed a seamless tapestry of accountability, leaving no room for her to squirm. Then came the climax of confrontation. Karen summoned her last defense, a blustering litany of threats about legal action, community standards, and public shame. But each word fell flat, like candle wax dripped on cold tile. My son handed the phone to me. I pressed play, letting her own terrified pleas for police backup echo down the street. Her demands for officers and justice sounded absurd against the backdrop of her failed key, and her exposed ignorance of basic law. A final jab. I calmly offered her a copy of the community covenants and a referral to legal aid. She snatched her phone and backed away, shoulders shaking, lips parted like a caught fish, powerless, defeated. In the aftermath, the crowd dispersed with soft murmurs of approval and relief. People whispered gratitude for standing up to bullying, for showing that even the smallest truths like a key that won't turn can dismantle a fortress of entitlement. My son lowered his camera and wrapped an arm around me, grinning as we watched Karen retreat to her SUV, where she sat for an agonizing minute before driving off without her precious master key. I closed the door behind us, feeling the hum of solid steel and the warmth of a victory shared by every neighbor who valued respect over rulebook tyranny. It dawned on me that while Karen's collapse was bitter, it sparked something vital. A renewed sense of community ownership, of shared boundaries protected by hearts, not threats. Later that evening, I posted my son's footage to our neighborhood forum, accompanied by a short note. Sometimes power isn't about who holds the key, but who respects the door. The responses flooded in messages of solidarity, memories of past overreaches, and plans for a communal block party to celebrate newfound unity. In that digital space where empathy often dissolves into argument, this story united old and new residents in a collective affirmation. No one person outranks the rest when we stand together. And as I turned off my porch light, I felt a quiet pride in having turned a moment of tension into one of justice and inspiration. Was I right or wrong? Share your thoughts below. The next morning dawned quietly as sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting slanted beams across the living room floor where my son and I sat wrapped in the afterglow of yesterday's upheaval. Word had traveled fast beyond our Cull Club forum into the wider neighborhood app, and within minutes of posting the video, comments poured in. Stories of other small tyrannies Karen had imposed, folk memories of late-night finds slipped under doors, whispered warnings of who ruled the block. I watched the names and avatars proliferate across the screen, and felt the warmth of collective breath released. My son nudged me with a grin, eyes bright with something fierce and hopeful, and I realized that our quiet home had become a spark for community courage. Over coffee, we devised a plan to leverage that spark. A weekend gathering at my lawn, an open invitation to every neighbor old-timers who'd endured Karen's reign and new families wary of HOA overreach. We'd call it the Key to Respect Block Party. I drafted a short post, careful to keep the tone inclusive. Join us Sunday at 2 o'clock for a celebration of shared boundaries and mutual respect. Bring a dish, bring a chair, bring your stories. No mention of lawsuits or fines, only an appeal to neighborly goodwill and empowered cooperation. By midday, RSVPs ticked upward. Over 50 names, including a few households who'd never attended any HOA meetings, and one surprise RSVP from Mrs. Caldwell next door, whose timid waves I'd always felt tinged with apology for Karen's behavior. As arrangements took shape, I reflected on the deeper currents beneath yesterday's drama. Karen's collapse had not merely been a spectacle of entitlement undone. It had exposed how fear and silence enable small despots to thrive. I thought of the cracked driveway where she'd once installed hidden cameras, of letters stamped with late fees that contradicted posted bylaws, of whispered friendships withheld to punish holidays unforeseen by her calendar. Each neighbor had lived under her shadow in isolation, fearing retribution for any sign of dissent. But yesterday's key-turn failure symbolized more. A simple lock could hold firm against intimidation, and an ordinary family camera could reveal truth more powerfully than memos from a board. I resolved that the block party would include a brief sharing circle, a chance for folks to speak without shame about injustices small and large, followed by a community pledge to maintain transparent channels for resolving disputes. No longer would decisions hinge on Karen's unilateral decrees or on obscure pages buried in HOA bylaws. Instead, we would institute quarterly potlucks where grievances could be aired openly, and we'd elect a rotating committee to handle concerns rather than coronate a single ruler. In the days leading up to Sunday, preparations stretched across lawns and driveways. My wife and I strung white lanterns between trees. My son assembled a makeshift photo booth with props, miniature locks, and giant cartoon keys to commemorate our moment of victory. Neighbors dropped by with covered dishes, spicy eggplant dip from the Martinez family, coconut macaroons baked by Mrs. Phillips, a hearty potato salad from the Ramirez clan that smelled of smoky paprika. Even Mr. Singh, who'd moved in last month, contributed a platter of samosas and offered to bring his portable speaker for music. Signs sprouted like wildflowers in yards. Block unity over tyranny, keys for respect, and one cheeky cardboard arrow pointing down my driveway reading, "No master key required here." With each decoration, I felt the atmosphere shift from wariness to anticipation, a community reclaiming its shared street as a place of camaraderie rather than conflict. Sunday arrived with brilliant clarity. Children dashed across the grass between folding chairs, laughter and music mingled under the lantern glow still perched on low branches, and adults clustered in warm knots discussing the changes to come. I took a deep breath and lifted my glass of lemonade homemade with mint from our garden, and called everyone's attention. My son stood beside me, hands in his pockets but chest puffed with pride. I spoke without notes, trusting the truth of our journey. How yesterday's confrontation had unveiled neither hero nor villain, but a collective longing for mutual respect. I invited anyone who wished to share a moment when they felt powerless under arbitrary rules to step forward. Silence reigned for a heartbeat before Mrs. Caldwell rose, voice trembling as she recounted how Karen had once threatened to ban her late husband's American flag from his own yard because it violated a color scheme rule. Her tears were met with gentle applause and nods of recognition. One by one, neighbors spoke off hidden cameras, unauthorized inspections, fines imposed without warning, each tale weaving a tapestry of lived experience that banished isolation. At the end, I proposed the neighborhood pledge: to uphold each other's rights, to communicate grievances directly, and to rotate leadership of our communal gatherings. A chorus of voices declared, "We pledge." As I held up a simple wooden key carved with our street name, a symbolic artifact we would pass to the host of the next event. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, the key raised aloft like a standard of reclaimed community. As afternoon waned into evening, children chased soap bubbles and elders shared stories on folding chairs, the air buzzing with new connections. I caught sight of my son teaching a group to perform a silly key turn dance he jokingly choreographed, and I laughed at the absurdity and joy of it all. My wife beside me squeezed my hand. Neither of us needed words to say how far we'd come from the tension of yesterday's ordeal. Our front porch, once a lone fortress, had transformed into a beacon of unity. Even the wooden board that bore yesterday's handwritten summary, "Master Key Malfunction Exposes Karen," had been placed at the refreshment table as a playful centerpiece, decorated now with fresh flowers and framed as a keepsake. People took turns posing beside it for photos, the board's message reclaimed as an emblem of collective strength rather than personal victory. When the last guest waved goodbye under lantern light and the chairs folded back into our garage, I felt a profound sense of completion. Karen's downfall had been bitter in the moment, but it had yielded a more enduring sweetness. A community awakened to its own agency, neighbors who now saw each other as custodians of respect rather than subjects of fear. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood app remained alive with invitations, coffee mornings, yard sales, book swaps, each activity echoing the pledge we'd made. And Karen? She lurked on the edges, her HOA emails dwindling into irrelevance as our self-governed gatherings flourished without her presence. Sometimes I spotted her car parked at the far end of the block, vacant and silent, a reminder that authority imposed without consent has no real home. Life returned to a comfortable rhythm, but something essential had shifted. The dynamic of power on our street was no longer top-down but woven through the ties we'd strengthened. My son's video had sparked a reckoning, but the true work lay in what followed: the conversations held, the shared meals, the rotations of leadership that kept any single person from ever holding too much sway again. And so we carried forward with eyes open, keys in hand only as symbols of trust, hearts aligned around a simple truth: respect cannot be locked away by any master key. Was this the end of our story, or the beginning of a new chapter? You decide. Share your thoughts below.